Quantum computing, like artificial intelligence and other breakthrough technologies that we've had a flurry of in the past couple of decades, promises even further to change the world that we know, for better or for worse. And today I'm going to talk to you about where that technology actually is from somebody who's in the field, and I get to see all of the current developments in hardware as well as software where I currently work in the algorithms world. Take everything that you see from news articles and company outputs with a grain of salt. So there are um, daily, weekly, monthly breakthroughs in different areas of the hardware technology. That being said, there are thousands of milestones that have to be reached in order for a full fledged quantum computer to be ready and available for production and for use. Today's machines are noisy at best. They are very limited in the scope in which they can work because they don't have the precision and reliability that's necessary to run some of the more extreme algorithms that require thousands and millions of different operations. And unfortunately, the way that quantum works, there's error in each operation. And as you can imagine, if you keep doing that, the compounded rate of error becomes um, um, mush, for lack of a better word. So your output at a certain point becomes nonsense. So there's all sorts of tricks that we use algorithmically, hardware wise, to try and guide that back to where it's supposed to be, but it's an ongoing fight and an ongoing struggle. And to give you a scale of how challenging of a topic this is, I would say that this is probably the biggest technological adventure that humankind has ever undertaken. And I don't say that lightly. Things like CERN, which took 30 years to really fully develop, are in that category. You know, 30 years and billions of dollars and many, many physicists. And they eventually got a product, but they had somewhat of an idea of what they were doing, a blueprint of how to get there to make this large collider. In quantum, we're still trying to build and kind of figure out how to make all of the hardware work. So we're building it and testing it on the fly, and it's not 100% sure which type of technologies are going to win out in the long run. Okay? To give you just an example, the most famous that you probably see is the chandelier from superconducting computing that is very common in IBM uses it, and a lot of other places in the world use these um, very cold cryo chambers to get down as close to absolute zero as possible. And there's a very small range at the bottom as you get closer and closer where the quantum effects are stable enough to really create a qubit of any use. There are downsides. For instance, the decoherence speeds for these superconducting technologies is quite small. So we're talking a couple hundred milliseconds to do the operations, and then the state becomes unstable, falls apart, and you lose any capability to do anything with it. There are technologies that are on the other end, trapped ions, where they're stable, but the interaction between the qubits is not as robust. So the lattice in which you can pass information back and forth isn't as easy to construct as you can in or as you would in a superconducting setting, where it's kind of easier to connect the qubits in different arrangements that make them easier to pass information and perform operations on. So those are just a few. There's others. There's atomic and things like that too. Feel free to look that up. But I highlight all this uh, just to remind you that there's a lot of different technologies competing We don't know what's going to win out, and it might end up being a combination of many of them. So, right now, the verdict is still out. What can today's machines do? You can do some basic operations. You can do some things like quantum chemistry, quantum sensing, that is starting to have real viability in the real world. I'd say we're probably 2 to 5 years off from quantum sensors and quantum chemistry breakthroughs that are truly meaningful. Quantum chemistry being a representation of these large chemical structures that require massive computation and optimization in a classical sense, but a quantum algorithm, because of the quantum effects, allows you to kind of cascade through that space with relative ease. And it turns out the machines are really good at that kind of stuff. So material science, chemistry, those things you're going to see in the next couple of years, and we might have some real, genuine breakthroughs soon. Um, Same thing with quantum sensing. So with quantum sensors, they're incredibly sensitive to any kind of background noise. That's the whole point of a quantum sensor. So think you can put something on the surface that might detect subsonic movements, hundreds of meters below, maybe even a mile below. So you get these little sensors that are extremely sensitive to perturbations. And that gives you a whole new level of measurement possibility. Those are also developing quickly. And so you will see some of those in the field soon enough. What you're not going to see in the near future is things like Shor's algorithm, which is famous for being able to undermine RSA encryption should we ever have a quantum computer that can run that fully. All right. For now, you don't need to be worried about some underground group producing a quantum computer out of left field, even in places like China, where the technology is highly competitive with those in the US. And the reason is because of the scale of, of entry to become a quantum ecosystem. So the amount of brain power, cognition, and expertise that you need to produce quantum computers from the hardware perspective is absolutely massive. Finding um, enough people to pull ahead or even closely match some of the large companies that have already set up shop. It's a big ask. So even with venture capitalists throwing, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, the numbers that I think are probably more relevant for producing an actual quantum computer, and that's in terms of long-term investments to make the technology milestones that are necessary, the whole shebang. We're talking billions and billions, if not, $1 trillion or more in the entire ecosystem in order to get to the point where we have an actual quantum machine ready. And it's because of those uh, high barriers to entry that it's highly unlikely that there's a rogue group doing this research in private alone that is capable of creating a quantum computer unbeknownst to the rest of the world. Um, Anytime there's PhDs that graduate with physics degrees in quantum sciences and quantum physics, those people are tracked, right? They're tracked by governments, they're tracked by industry. So if a significant portion of them just went missing, we would know. It's the same thing with like nuclear physicists, right? If someone were to go underground, you would have some kind of trail. So the odds of that actually happening are very, very low. Okay, what can you expect in the future? So I had already mentioned 2 to 5 years. quantum sensing, more quantum chemistry breakthroughs, material science breakthroughs. Um, as the technologies mature, more and more of the algorithms will come online. Right now, we live in the noisy era still, or the semi noisy era, um, where algorithms that make use of the noisy atmosphere, or at least kind of build in parallel to that, they also take advantage of classical computation. So those are things like QAOA, very famous algorithms for optimizing quantum circuits, similar to the way a neural network trains. There's hyperparameters, and those things um, optimize for some solution. So you'll see more of that come online, and you'll see more hybridizations come online. And I'd say probably in the next 5 years, there'll be, beyond scientific curiosities of um, milestones that are happening in the science field. There are milestones that are happening very often that we're like, wow, I can't believe we got there. Um, those things are happening at a pretty frequent basis. It's astonishing and impressive. But the real winner is going to be when we can produce a result that is meaningful to a class of problems that have value that exceeds the cost of creating the solution with the quantum computer. So let me kind of say that again. So if it costs you X amount of money to run the quantum machine to produce a answer or result, and you can do it classically cheaper, what's the point? So you have to have a value, an increase in value, and you have to solve something that typically is either hard to do, or impossible to do classically. So those are kind of my criteria. It has to have value in dollars and computational time. Otherwise, it's just a kind of a trick at the moment. So that's how I define it. Okay, thank you so much for your time. If you're interested in more of these talks, subscribe. I would love to have you back on this channel. There will be more. I'll do one on artificial intelligence soon. I have several on the backbone for that, as I am an AI researcher, have been, and also a social scientist. Please subscribe, give me a like or a comment, and as always, do not put notifications on. You come to me when you want to, not when the algorithm wants to ping you. Thank you so much for your time. I will catch everybody later. Bye.